In today's episode, we will consider the most effective way for you to research and take notes as part of your history project. This would be useful for those of you undertaking National 5 and higher assignments, but it's especially useful for the Advanced Higher History dissertation. In order to consider how best to do this, we will look at different topics. We'll start off by considering ways that you might want to plan your research, before we go on to look at all the different types of sources you can use. From there, we will consider the ways that you should record your sources so you have a note of where they came from, and we'll also think about how you use those sources to find your information. After this, we'll consider the obvious issue of how to actually take notes, and last but not least, we'll consider ways of organising those notes so that you are allowed to easily access all the facts you are looking for when you come to write up your project. Let's start off by considering ways to plan your research. It's important to think about a plan as you might do a roadmap. It's unlikely that during a journey you would start off without knowing, firstly, where you were going, or secondly, how to get there. Similarly, if you try to undertake research without having a key plan of the facts you're looking to find out, it's unlikely you'll succeed. You're going to have most success if you actually know where you're going before you start, so planning is vital. Before you start your research, you need to think about the key topics you want to investigate. This is important for different reasons. Firstly, it's going to make it easier for you to take relevant notes. If you don't have a clear idea of what it is you want to find out, you may instead simply write down lots of general facts which aren't really of any use to you. And of course, it's going to make it easier for you to find the information in the first place. If you have an idea of how to use an index in a book, this is most effective if you know the specific issues you might be looking for. Of course, this brings us to the question of how do I identify the facts to research before I've actually started researching? Well, there's different ways you can do this. One of the best things you can do is general background reading. This might involve you reading books or specific chapters of books. It could involve you looking at magazine articles or perhaps even films or documentaries. By doing this, you would gain a general understanding of the topic, and in doing so, this might identify the particular factors or sub-factors that it would be worth researching further. You might also do this by discussing ideas with your classmates. Perhaps other people are considering similar topics or know something about the issue and thus can suggest possible options. And finally, you can obviously review the issue with your teacher, discussing with them the possible issues to research and trying to see if they have any further suggestions. Whatever you do though, you're trying to identify two things: the factors, which are your main issues, and also the sub-factors being the issues which relate to your main factors and will help you find out more detail. Let's look at an example. If you were researching the policies which helped the Nazis keep power in Germany between 1933 and 1939, there are different factors you might consider. You might look at economic policies. You might look at foreign policies. Social policies would be relevant, and you may also look at military policies. These are the main factors. This, though, can still be quite general. So, to help you in your research, you might then want to identify the sub-factors which you'll consider. These, quite simply, are the points which relate to each individual factor, but develop the point a bit more. For example, when looking at economic policies, you might consider the different ways that the Nazis tried to boost employment. You might look at how they tried to enhance work conditions, and finally you might consider their support for businesses. You would identify sub-factors for each of your main factors. You can see the way that having the sub-factors makes it much easier to envisage the type of facts you might want to look at when you conduct your research. You might even want to make a spider diagram of your research plan. You would start off by identifying the different types of policies to research, and then you would identify next to them the sub-factors. This visual aid might make it easier for you to identify possible gaps in your topics. Let's now consider the types of sources that we might want to use. Obviously, it's important to use a wide range of sources, and in particular, You should also try and use a wide range of types of sources as well. This could include books, magazine articles, academic journals, and also film clips and documentaries. Your project, especially if it's advanced higher history, will also benefit from primary sources, and these are in fact compulsory for the advanced higher course. Primary sources, of which there are many to choose from, include things such as newspapers, speeches, diaries, or government documents. Using primary sources not only gives you a more in-depth understanding of the topic, but shows a real commitment to research. Let's now think about how you record your sources so that you have a note of where you found your information. It's really important that when you take notes, you explain exactly where you found it. Not only does this allow people to check if what you've said is accurate, it also stops plagiarism, as it is you acknowledging that some of the comments you're making in fact came from other people. If you read a book, you want to, in basic terms, think about who wrote it, the author, the title of the book, the publication date, and there will be different ones for different books depending on if it's a second edition, and also the publisher. For articles, if you can, you would identify the name of the person who wrote it, the title of the article, the title of the magazine or journal in which it's published, and finally the publication date. If you're looking at websites, there are different facts to find. If there is an author, then it would be good to take a note of this name. You should also take a note of the title of the article, and also the title of the website on which you found it. You should also take a note of the web address, and also the specific date that you accessed it on, in case in future the website is perhaps amended. If you watch documentaries, the main things to look for would be the title of the specific show, the individual name of the episode, and also the date that it was originally shown, and also the channel if you can find this information. For written sources, there's another thing you have to make sure you do when you take your notes. Quite simply, page numbers. Make sure that if somebody was to want to check up your research, they can easily identify it. Simply saying the name of a book or an author will be very difficult to find an individual fact if the book happens to be 300 or 400 pages long. Let's consider now that we've identified our sources, how we go about actually finding our information, using them in the most effective way. Remember, the first thing that we need is a plan, because once we've got our plan, we know the factors and sub-factors that we're looking for, and by doing this, it makes it much easier to find the facts we need. Instead of just simply reading general sections, this will allow you to look for specific facts, and the following tips will help you use this for different types of sources. If you use books, you should think about the following. Firstly, and obviously, read the chapter list at the front. It may be that there are certain sections or chapters which you should read the entirety of. However, if you want to be more specific, then use the index at the back of the book. This will allow you to look in much more close detail at specific topics or issues that you're investigating. If you use the internet, there's also different things to use. Firstly, it's important that you only use reliable and recognisable websites, perhaps university websites, or recognised organisations such as the BBC. When conducting a search, if you use quote marks around your phrase, this can allow you to search for an exact phrase, which might be useful if you're looking for very specific information. In particular, Google Scholar is a very good way of searching and finding a range of different sources that are at an academic level in a relatively simple way. If you're watching films and documentaries, think about these actions. Firstly, plan beforehand. Identify the topics you want to research. From there, don't try and write out entire quotes. What you want to do instead is focus on keywords or phrases that are of use to you. And of course, remember, make sure it's easy to pause the film. Pausing the film to take notes is useful because it stops you forgetting the facts and in particular possibly missing something else which would be helpful. Now that we've identified the type of sources we'll use and how to find our actual facts, we have to think about the most effective way to take notes. There's different ways you can do this. You can write direct quotes. This means you write down the exact phrase which the original author wrote down. What's better though, and probably easier, in terms of maintaining your notes and fitting them into your final dissertation, is paraphrasing. This means when you try and put the comment from the historian into your own words, identifying only the relevant facts. Again, in all cases though, you should properly identify who the original commenter was. It's also possible to consider your own interpretation and opinion. Adding your own thoughts to those which have been made before is an important part of any history project, but you have to make sure that you don't confuse your own thoughts with those of the historians. This would be very similar to plagiarism. There's different ways to do this. One simple way of taking notes is using bullet points. Simply write the title of the book or other source at the top of the page, and then if there's a page number, write that at the side before writing the key facts. You may want to use different things. You may want to consider actions such as mind maps. Mind maps work in a similar way. You consider the particular facts that you're looking for, and every time you find a fact, you draw a line off the mind map along with the relevant page number and write it from there. Again, of course, it's important that you remember to write down the name of the source you're using. Finally, another approach can be to use tables. Divide your page up into the key topics that you're trying to find, write the name of your source at the top, and every time you find a relevant fact under each heading, you write it there. This is an especially good way to ensure that the work you've researched is already organised. You might also want to leave space to write your own opinions next to research facts. For example, if you're taking your notes, you would write the comment from the historian, and then under the personal thoughts heading, you could perhaps link this to general ideas or thoughts you've been having about the overall topic. The personal thoughts section will be of great use to you when you come to write the final project. Think about these hints and tips as well when you work. Firstly, make sure you don't just write down lots of notes to make yourself feel good. Try to focus on what you specifically need and will help you. Don't leave your research too late. Make sure you do it well in advance to give you plenty of time to write and rewrite your project. Try and use a range of different sources and source types. And also, above all else, make sure you have a research plan to make it easier to carry out the research in the first place. Finally, let's think about how you go about organising those notes. Once you've conducted all of your research, you'll probably have lots and lots of pages of paper. Some of it might be organised, but some of it not. You don't want to lose out important facts and thus waste your time. So let's have a system to organise those notes. You might have a ring binder with section dividers for each factor that you're researching, and each time you find a relevant fact, it goes in a particular page in that section. Has the advantage with a ring binder of being able to open and close it and remove pages as required, or add them. You might have specific books or jotters that you use for each individual topic. Green for one, pink for another, blue for another. And again, each time you're researching a specific factor, you would only write the facts you found in there, as well as identifying the source. You might do all of this but have electronic files, typing up the notes you found each night into a particular file. Or another approach which can be used, and is especially used for the ring binder, is to use different colours of paper for each individual topic. This has the advantage that if you lose one or drop them for any reason, they're easy to put back together. Remember though, if you use some of these approaches, it might mean that you need multiple notes for the same source, so a separate piece of paper with the source at the top for each of your different sources and each of your different factors. Looking at this system, you can see that there are 3 facts which have been identified from the same source. The simple step then is to put them under the correct heading, and obviously you'll have more than one under each heading. Another way to do it can be highlighting. Once you've identified at the end, think about the key factors you're researching and highlight the relevant colours. One final approach you can take is the use of a mind map. This would help you organise the main points that you've identified in your research, as well as identifying the specific facts. For each, you would simply identify the factors, and then draw legs coming off them where you link the facts that you found out for this. This is quite a simple way for you to organise the main points before you consider how you're going to go about writing your final project.